Okay. It looks like I'm live. So tonight is the night before Valentine's Day. Now, I used to be a waitress back in the day or a server, whatever we're calling him now. And my ex-husband also was a server. So we never did anything on Valentine's Day. If we ever celebrated Valentine's Day, it would be like the day before or the day after. Like, I'm not trying to go out on a holiday to be in a line with like a bajillion other people. It just seems very like frustrating. It's a lot. And I've had my fill sort of on the other side of it. So it's not something I ever really did. Um, and so I've had the opportunity to see a lot of people over the years celebrating Valentine's Day. Oh wow, I'm like really close. That's all right. Celebrating Valentine's Day. And okay, so the day's supposed to be about love. And the amount of people who were not being loving, and who were also expecting like wait staff to provide the love and the ambiance was kind of strange. Like it doesn't seem like that's where that should be coming from. So it's also been pretty interesting seeing Valentine's Day for victims of abuse. I think a lot of people don't realize that they're not in loving relationships, one. And also, victims of abuse don't realize they're in abuse dynamics. So they put so much pressure on like this one day out of the year. Obviously, we're talking US. I don't know how many other countries celebrate Valentine's Day. I wouldn't be surprised if like Canada and the UK or something, but I'm not gonna assume that Singapore is celebrating Valentine's Day. But when your relationship is not going well, you're more likely to put so much weight on a holiday or an event like a wedding, the proposal, you know, um, as as if that will make up for the disaster that is the ups and downs of this relationship. And actually, and I say ups and downs for a reason because the amount of times I read a person and they say, like, oh, our relationship has its ups and downs, but we still love each other. And the ups and downs are a problem. It is a highly volatile relationship dynamic. And so the victim or target or whomever that's in this dynamic thinks that that's normal and that you like sacrifice for love. And I had to get to a point where I said to myself, I clearly don't know what love is because what I think love is having this particular outcome, which is not a loving outcome. So clearly, I have some assumptions I need to rethink. And I've talked about this a lot on the subreddit. I've written about it quite a bit. I feel like done a video on it. But basically, I came to the conclusion that the love feeling that we feel isn't love. It's emotional attachment. So that intense connected feeling you get when you feel like like, oh my gosh, I feel that love feeling. It's not love. Emotional attachment helps us love. Loving is the actions, and I have found that when there's an emotion associated with love that's like the actual love feeling, it's extremely like a gentle, very gentle, positive orientation towards somebody. That intense connected feeling is not love. The real love feeling is like so in the background. You might not even really notice it. And then if you're in a toxic dynamic, that love feeling, the intense emotional attachment, it becomes possessiveness. And so I find that the less oriented towards reality you are in terms of your relationship, the more you're going to latch onto this feeling as being proof that the relationship you're in is a loving one and a good one, despite all the evidence. So it's extremely difficult to sort of come to an understanding like, oh, I'm not in a relationship where love exists. So you find people, they get hung up on like the Valentine's Day or the birthday, the wedding, the anniversaries, and thinking like, oh, this will be the thing that reinforces my false beliefs that I'm in a loving relationship with a person who cares about me. Um, so it's a lot of weight for one day. And I wish victims of abuse who don't realize they're in the abuse dynamic, I wish they could sort of recognize like what they're doing. They're hoping this one day or event. And the thing is, abusers, they'll make those events special at the beginning a lot of the time. But the further into the cycle of abuse you are, the less special those events are. They become opportunities to humiliate the victim or to reinforce their low status in the relationship or the abuser's lack of respect and contempt for them. Uh, and and the victim is just trying so hard, thinking, "Oh, but this is supposed to be a day about love. Don't they love me? We love each other. We're in this relationship dynamic. So we must." Um, so oof. There's I worry for victims of abuse for Valentine's Day. And then let's say you've been in an abuse dynamic and you're finally out of it, but you miss the abuser. You get a lot of hoovering attempts around holidays, Valentine's Day, and it's extremely hard to deal with if you haven't like fully healed and like moved on from this person and you're like now understand they're terrible. I don't love this. So the Hoover, you have to stand strong and reinforce to yourself that they're just trying to see if I'm still on the hook for them. They're just fishing with emotional bait to see if I'll bite. And Um, don't bite. So I feel bad. I feel bad, having an understanding, when you see somebody that's in this dynamic and you want to say, oh my gosh, they don't love you. This isn't what love is. Anything they do on this day, if they bother to do something that isn't dismissive, it is not even going to make up for it anyway. Right? Like, how could one good day make up for mistreatment for the rest of your lives together? It doesn't. So, for anybody who's in an abuse dynamic and dealing with Valentine's tomorrow, I really hope that you stay safe. And I hope you don't get your hopes up. And I hope you have people who care about you that you can sort of reorient with, that you're a loving, lovable person. And however this other person is treating you is not relevant information. The way they treat you has nothing to do with you and it has everything to do with them. Anyway, um I wanted this time I had like a couple of ideas that I wanted to talk about. Oh, no, actually, let me back it up. Okay. So the abuse dynamic. I didn't realize until I started doing more research and talking to more people and just sort of seeing how it works out. No one tells you the honeymoon stage disappears. and the abuse dynamic speeds up. So the more times you go through the abuse dynamic, which is sort of the phases of the abuse cycle. So you have your honeymoon phase, and then you have your building tension phase. Then you have your inciting incident phase, which is, like an abuse incident of abuse occurs. And then you have the abuser is so sorry phase. Then you get back to the honeymoon phase. Um, and it goes faster the more times you go through the cycle, and the honeymoon part of it starts disappearing, as does the abuser apology part. So in the beginning, before they've really got you mentally conditioned to the reality they want you to think is real, they still have to operate within reality as it is, as in, I did this terrible thing. And now I need to apologize for it, but also it's kind of your fault, but, like, also, we should both be, taking responsibility for ourselves, but, now we're gonna be in a honeymoon stage, you know? And a lot of victims, it's hard to get out of that because the honeymoon stage is when a victim thinks they have, like, there's been a power flip in the dynamic. And the victim starts to feel empowered, right? Because the abusers apologized and accepted they were wrong for whatever it is. So the victim is starting to feel like, "Oh, okay, I'm in a good place. I'm in a good position, and I can say what I think, and I can, communicate how I feel, and they're going to take me seriously and listen." And then there comes a point where the abuser's just over it. um there's this phrase from when I was a kid that parents would say if they thought just you were kind of like feeling yourself too much, they'd call you like uppity, or you might call somebody uppity if you felt that they were below you. It also has racial connotations from like the South. I'd say it's more like an older generations that would be more familiar with this, but there's a point at which the abuser thinks that the victim is being uppity and starts to be angry and have contempt for the victim being in a position of empowerment. And so the longer that goes on, the more the abuser can't stand it. And they may even be saying to themselves, well, I did this wrong thing. And so they're talking themselves out of their response. But then they get to the point where they can't stand it. And so then you start walking on eggshells, and the victim knows something's changed, but they don't know what it is. And so everybody's walking on eggshells until finally there's some inciting incident. And now the abuser is engaging in their rage, or they're engaging in their machinations and their physical or emotional abuse. And all of that they've been holding in, watching the victim be empowered, um, and just feeling triggered by it. And it comes out, and they're punishing the victim. And whatever the inciting incident is not actually the reason. It's the straw that breaks the camel's back for the abuser, for them to stop behaving themselves. Because either they've now given themselves permission to act on their earlier rage that they were keeping suppressed, or it's just they no longer can take it. Because they're having to fake they're having to fake being a good person. They're having to fake being a reasonable partner. Um, it's not real. And so there's only so it's like that's that saying of the mask drops. And so when the inciting incident happens and the abuser starts to really engage in abusive behaviors, then there comes that point of, well, I've got to blame the victim because it's not my fault. Because if it's my fault, I have to accept that I'm a bad person, and I'm not going to do that. You know, um, the more unself-aware somebody is, the less able they are to accept reality and to accept the reality that they are a poor partner. Speaking of which, and it's on my notes, These people are not partners. And I know we started using the partner verbiage to be inclusive for like the queer community. So we all started saying partners in that way. So we're not saying wives, we're not saying husbands. Um, a lot of people are in long-term relationships. So, saying girlfriend and boyfriend for a long-term relationship doesn't feel mature. So you say partner. But the words we use really have an impact on how we see the world. And so we're saying partner, partner, partner toward a person who's not a partner. And it's really hard to think ourselves out of that language. And one of the things I like to bring up to a victim of abuse is like, is this your partner? I'm partner. I'm a big fan of sarcastic quotes. Um, I'll put friend in the sarcastic quotes. I'll put parent in the sarcastic quote. I don't care if they're biologically your parent. If they are terrible, they're not a parent. They just are in a legal position they're not fulfilling through biology or whatever, but they're not actually parenting. Abuse is not parenting. So anyway, so back to the cycle of abuse. So you get to a point where it's literally just eggshells, yelling, eggshells, yelling, and the more you're in the eggshells yelling, the more empowered the abuser feels because at this point, they've dispensed with any pretense of, like, understanding that what they're doing is not okay. They're fully invested in whatever version of reality allows them to continue to treat the other person the way they're treating them. So, happy Valentine's Day. Um, yeah, um, it's truly trying to get back to how it was. It's declining returns. Diminishing returns is a concept, in I wanna say economics, but also, like, if you're talking about food, okay? So let's say you have, like, a dessert. It's an amazing dessert, and you think it's the most incredible, num num, delicious thing that you've ever eaten. The first bites you have, oh my gosh, like, yes, chef's kiss. But then there comes a point where you've eaten enough and you're like, "Oh, yeah, it's still good," right? But it doesn't have the same hit from before, not the same dopamine response or whatever it is. And then you get to a point where you're just like you're eating it and it's fine, but like it's lost the wow factor, I guess. And so yeah, so that the victims are trying to get back to the beginning. The first couple of bites, they're diminishing returns. Because also the abuser is putting forward a version of themselves that is not real. They may not be aware that this is not real. They may think, "Oh, this is what I need to do to get someone," or, "Well, this is what everybody does. You put your best foot forward." And so they're not being themselves. And so the other person who's in starting this dynamic, they think, "Oh, this is how this person is, and I love it, and it feels amazing." And you get that intense, like, feeling right at the beginning, and it makes it feel like, "Oh, this is faded." Like, it is not faded. It is your neurochemical biology that is, firing on all cylinders, basically. And that's a trap. I'm pretty convinced, actually, there's no there's no science behind this. This is just like a little pet theory that I've developed over the years. I wonder how much of, like, a victim's, like, desire to be with an abuser even after they know this person is treating them terribly comes down to chemistry and oh my gosh, pheromones. Like like you smell a person and you're just like, "Oh, I wanna be next to this person." Like, how strong are pheromones? I don't know. It's something that occurred to me, and I do wonder, because sometimes there's, like, you know better, but you're still going back for it, like an addict. maybe there's a pheromone component. Definitely, the abuse is creating, a biological response in your own body that your body gets addicted to. So the highs and the lows, we're spiking the cortisol, spiking the adrenaline, spiking the, stress hormones, and then we're spiking the bonding hormones and the oxytocin, and they're oxytocin is actually, we know it as the bonding hormone, but it's also a salience hormone, which is basically, it's a hormone that's operating to let your brain know this is something to pay attention to. This is salient information. This is critical, key, and important. So not only are you feeling the bonding part of it, but your brain's also going, "Ah, yes, this is so important, and I need to we're locked in, on this particular person and experience." I do also think that there are lots of victims of abuse who the abuser meets a unique overlap of, like, characteristics that the victim hasn't found anywhere else yet. Oh my gosh. No. Okay. The um so for example, people talk about the love languages, which is not science, but it's a pretty popular way to kind of talk about compatibilities. And if your love language um, is is related to a passion you have, and that someone is with you in that passion and helping you engage more in your passion, and no one else has ever done that before, even though they might mistreat you, you might think to yourself, like, oh, this is worth it. It is worth it to deal with this other stuff because this is so valuable to me. And so often trying to convince victims of abuse that it's not um, is very difficult. And they don't usually seem to let go until it's very, very clear that there is no honeymoon period, that we're not headed back to that direction. Um, and that is past. And it's hard to convince someone it's not real if it's still occurring. But if the abuser is no longer engaging in a honeymoon dynamic with the victim, the further away they get from it, the more they realize, like, oh, this thing I thought was so valuable is not occurring in the way that it was. Everybody sort of has to get to their own understanding of the relationship they're in and then be able to let go. So, it's a hard process because you're unraveling the lies you've started to believe are true. And we hate doing that. It hurts. It hurts to let go of the lies, as my friend Faith Worley says. So, I also wanted to talk about sibling abuse, not really related to Valentine's Day, but usually when I'm talking about abuse, I'll talk about like friends, romantic, a significant other, and I'll talk about um, that's parent, partner, friend. Yeah, and so a parental abuse. And then on the side, every once in a while, I'll cover like workplace abuse, which is really kind of bullying. But we don't really talk about sibling abuse enough. And to it's harder to identify sibling abuse because the traditional kind of idea of abuse is that someone is powering over another person and being harmful to them. And because siblings are together all of the time, and also there may not be like an ascendant dominant sibling. It could be going back and forth between them. Unless you have like a golden child dynamic. Um, so it can be a little harder to parse out sibling abuse. Um, and so I find that it isn't as discussed as most other kinds of abuse are. I really find that sibling abuse becomes so much clearer when everybody's an adult because the parents then continue to do things that when you were a kid, you were like, "Oh, okay, I guess that makes sense." But for an adult person, it does not make sense. Like, why would you treat this person this way, but you're treating me this way? Or the sibling is treating me a certain way, and it's like, "Why would you treat me this way? We're grown folk. This doesn't make any sense." Um, so yeah, it's a form of abuse that I don't talk about as much. And then every once in a while, I'm like, "I should do more on that." And then, just sort of other things come up just because most people are dealing with, parental or significant other abuse. But yeah, every once in a while, I'm like, "Oh, I should do more on this," and then I forget about it, which is that's on me. Um, so I did also I wanted to talk about okay, this is gonna sound weird, but the Academy Awards and the Olympics, and just sort of things we've seen in, like, vintage, retro, historical media. Like, have you ever seen a movie or a TV show from, I don't know, the 40s, 50s, the 60s, the 70s, and they're showing, like, luxury, and it's like, "Oh, is this luxury?" I've actually been in the Biltmore, mansion in North Carolina, and I was very surprised because it is a very grand mansion, but it wasn't as luxurious as I was expecting, and so I've sort of been thinking about this off and on, about how what luxury is has kind of the needle on it has moved. Like, if you look at, presidents, f like JFK or something, and you watch JFK and you see him in the White House, and you're like, "Well, kinda looks normal." Um, it doesn't seem like wealthy people were living at what we consider wealth today. There's been, the luxury goalposts have moved, I guess, or maybe I just don't have enough exposure to wealthy people and places, which is could very well be the truth, but, I just so much of what we consider reality is based off what we see, and when we realize that there's been a drastic shift in what we see, I think it can help us adjust our own personal expectations. I've lived in some very large cities, with people who are presenting like they have a lot of money, and so one of the very large cities, I mean, we're talking like worldwide large city. One of the cities I lived in, is known for a lot of import-export, and import-export people being very wealthy, and I don't I was much older before I realized, "Oh, it's probably because there's drugs in the import export." Um, or bringing in other things or people. Um, so when you're looking at luxury and feeling like, "Oh, I wish I had whatever it is." Um, oh my gosh, I don't wanna be I don't wanna misspeak over, like, every very wealthy person, but, like, how many wealthy people have built their wealth through alternative means that, diminish the human condition, is I guess what I'll say. So, it's kind of interesting to see as we move forward that the standards are expanding, and also the level of money people are accumulating is expanding, and also, the shenanigan actually, I shouldn't say that because the shenanigans I think have always been there. Um, it's that saying, like, "Nothing there's nothing new under the sun." So, I'm getting a front row seat to how accurate that is. But I just oh, yes, the Academy Awards. It used to be just a thing where, like, people in the industry would get together and just, like, give each other awards, and I'm not saying there wasn't maybe some minor kind of, like, social in-group politicking about that. I mean, any group's gonna have something like that, but it wasn't even broadcast for the first however many years. They did it, I think, in some hotel. I really should have double checked this first, but I just remember thinking like, "Oh, it was low key. It was people getting together." They were like, "I'll wear a fancy dress." And then you look at the level of the awards now and just how massive it is. Or the same thing happened with the Olympics. When you see pictures of historic Olympics, it's not it the people aren't running to the same level. It's not as epic, except for maybe the Munich games. Hitler was real big on, you know, making things very dictatorial. But it just seems like it was just like a lot more low key, and now there's so many people involved, there's so much promotion around it, everybody is within, like, tenths of a millisecond of a whatever, between each other, until unless you get somebody like Usain Bolt, or I don't know who it is now, but, um, although I think he did name his daughter something also incredibly epic. Which is a lot of weight. That's a lot of weight to bear. I think about Michael B. Jordan with that name, like telling his friends in high school, like, I'm gonna be an actor, I'm gonna be famous. And they're just like, okay, Michael B. Jordan. But like, if that's your name, that's a lot. That's a lot to carry. I try to give my child a name that was like an interesting name, a unique name, but not something that he would find it overwhelming to have. So far, so good. I mean, naming another human being is extremely difficult. Um, so so far, I think I aced that one. Anyway, um, let's see. I don't know that there's anything else. I just sort of wanted to touch base. Um, yeah, really, I'm just mostly concerned about the Valentine's Day stuff. Anyway, um, I'll talk to you guys next time. And let me see. There we go. End stream.